You guys can use the chairs at this desk too, if you want to sit back.
Okay, so what, oh, you guys could have still sat at the table, but it's all right. What are you guys, from what you guys have talked about already, or maybe what's coming up, has anything intrigued you? Anything made you think about what you may want to do post high school? Or is it really just a class where you're just like, this is kind of fun. I just get to like experience and see what all these different trades are about? Like, where are you guys at? Any excitement at all about anything you've covered or will cover? Yeah. Any thoughts about future careers? No? What year are you guys? Sophomores? Okay, you guys have time.
Sophomores. Yeah.
Junior and freshman.
Okay. So kind of a good mix. But most of you are sophomores. Okay. All right. Well, there's a little less conversation there. So I graduated from K-State in 2012, my master's in architecture, and then I went to seminary after that. So when Mrs. Weber brought up architecture, I was like, this would be kind of cool. I can maybe teach some stuff. So it's really abridged, but you guys have already talked about materials, right?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit about materials and construction, so that's good. So today we're going to talk about is, we're going to do a little quasi project. Now there's going to be a lot of loose ends, and nothing's going to be really, because of the time that we have, you're not really going to be able to get too in-depth into stuff. But my hope is you can just get a little bit of a taste of some different elements of what it means to be an architect. So today we're going to kind of go through a client interview. So back when I was it was probably when I was an intern at a firm in Wichita. So may have I'd already graduated at that point. But it really hit me that we in architecture, you have a problem, a client has a problem, and you don't tell them the solution, you help them find the solution. So what we're talking about today may seem kind of pointless. Okay, who cares about this client meeting? It's really important for us in a lot of capacities, not only as an architect, but really in any career as a problem solver, that you have a client, right? Because oftentimes clients, they have a better understanding of their problem than you do, even if they can't put it into words, right? Because they live in that space. Or if it's like for a mechanical engineer, they have a product, they have a need that they want a product to solve. And so you're inserting yourself to help them discover it, but you're not simply providing it for them, right? So another way to think about it is you could design a product that works perfectly for you, but your client might be left-handed and you're right-handed. So you can give them this product, but it's not really going to help them. Does that make sense? So it's also in terms of the faith. So when we think about the faith, right, there's something called proselytizing. Have you heard that term before? To proselytize? No? You guys heard it? No? Okay, you guys heard it? No? All right, good. So proselytizing is, I had a guy the other day, he's Hindu, and he comes into our chapel to pray, and he says, I'm waiting for God to speak to me. And I was like, oh, okay, so like you believe there's a God? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, so you're coming here like just to hear him? And he's like, yeah. I was like, okay, so you think you can have a personal relationship? It's like, well, just know that regardless of the outcome, like God desires for X, Y, and Z. And he says, are you proselytizing me? Like telling someone they should believe something. I was like, whoa, no, I was just trying to like kind of figure out why he's even here, right? If he's Hindu, which Hindus don't necessarily believe they don't believe in the Christian God. I was trying to like just kind of help them to see that like God actually desires to know you personally, and that's what you're like hungering for here. So proselytizing was you just tell someone what to believe. Okay, so we don't do that in a client meeting either, because we don't tell someone, oh, this is what you need. No, you have to help them come to that, right? But at a certain point in time, maybe some people work that way, right? Where they actually, they're telling you something, but they don't want to accept a reality. They don't want to accept a fact, okay? So proselytizing gets a kind of a dirty name, but it's actually still helpful in certain circumstances to kind of just tell someone the truth, right? But that only comes with a relationship. So in a client meeting, you can challenge someone. Like I've done that with clients before, where I've heard what they want, we kind of work through it, and then at some point, I just kind of spell it out for them. I said, but really what you're doing is you're just wanting to add a bunch of space here, but you're wasting this. You don't need this space. Oh, I never thought about it like that. Does that make sense? So you want to kind of bring that to them. And so I think the biggest thing for you as we go through this today is you have to kind of know the vision. You have to know what your client wants. Again, this isn't just a purely architectural thing. This works in the construction realm. This works in the mechanical engineering realm. Honestly, to a certain degree, it works in education too, right? Because you can't just come in with a curriculum that's not really what the class is all about. So you have to understand what the client wants and needs, okay? So at the basic, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to find a project that was, had realistic features for you. So we're actually gonna do a project, I don't know if Mrs. Weber's told you, but we're gonna do a project for the school, right? So it's kind of like, well, if we could imagine something new, what would that be? What would that look like? And so we're gonna add on kind of mostly in the kind of the home ec. We're gonna add on in the physics and biology kind of sectors. Okay, so we pretty much took everything down at that end of the school and said, can we make something better for you? Okay. So what I want us to do today is we're going to start with the 30,000 foot view. When we get into the conversation with Mrs. Holden, and she actually just kind of popped in, we're going to just listen. Listen to let her dream a little bit, right? In a dream world, what would you want? What are your needs, right? So I want you to find something to write the stuff down with, because you guys are going to do the questioning. I'm not going to ask the questions. You guys are going to ask the questions, okay? So pull something out to write some of this stuff down.
Here, guys.
Okay, so what are can you guys think of some of the questions that would be good to ask? So Mrs. Holden's going to represent kind of the home ec kind of side of things. So what would be some good questions to ask? What do you need? Yeah. Okay. So go ahead and write that down. What do you need? Again, we're going to work from 30,000 feet down to a more centralized. So at the beginning, we're going to kind of let her speak. So we're going to kind of say, ask her questions like, what are your needs? Maybe what's something you like? You can say, what's something you like in your current room that you would like to see in a new room? Another way to phrase that, so you don't have to necessarily make this a separate question, but we could write underneath that, what works well and what doesn't in your current space. When we're thinking about a building, is there something that you guys would like in a classroom, right? It's a little different because you're students, but what's something that most people would say is kind of a must-have for a classroom? Don't overthink this. It's really, really basic. We have it in this classroom even.
Desk.
Chairs, desks. Okay. You could say, what kind of furniture do you need in your room? I wouldn't say those are essential to a building, though.
Lights.
Okay, lights. Push that a little bit more.
Electricity.
Okay, no, let's go back to the lights. Push it a little bit more. No. Talk about a building. Windows. Do you need any windows? Right? That's a big thing. Because some places, some spaces, if you're working like in a lab, they may not necessarily need windows or want windows because it could affect an experiment. Okay? So you have to start thinking about it. The technical term for that is like tectonically. Right? So tectonically means what is the technos? What are the main components here that are going to affect a space? Right? From materials to spatial recognition to natural daylight, things like that. Okay? So again, we're at 30,000 foot view. You could ask something as well, like, do you need access to the outside? Right? That's another thing to think about. Would you ever need access to outdoor space? Okay, so she's doing kind of the home ec side. So If we have cooking involved, if she needs a cooking space, you could say, well, how much storage do you need for dishes? Are you ever going to want to entertain? Like these are some of these questions that I want you guys, as we get through the conversation, if something comes up that you think could affect the design, then I want you to ask it, right? Because the best thing is here as well, guys, when you take down the answers, even if they use adjectives or certain adverbs that catch your attention, write it down. Because when you come back to them, when you present an idea, you want to be able to take their needs and give it back to them in their same language. Okay? Like, well, I want a home, I want a domestic, like a home feeling. I want it to feel like someone's home kitchen. Okay, jot those words down, because then when you present that back to them, you want to give it to them in a way that is in their language. Right? Same thing is true in the faith. When we talk to someone and they say something about a need, you want to use that same language back when you convey the gospel. Okay? So the last thing I would say is then as we go through the conversation, they kind of paint the dream, and then you can start working them down to maybe some of the essentials. You can even use that word. What are the essentials of any change to your building or any addition to the building? Okay? So just change. I would write that down. What are the essential things to this project? Because there's money behind all of this, guys. So in a real life project, people can dream, but at the end of the day, they only have so much money to make it possible. All right? And then the very last thing would be if they say, or two last things. If they're confused about a word or term they use, it's okay. Ask them. I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. Can you explain that for me? All right? Just be free to ask that question. Don't feel like you're going to look stupid. It actually empowers the client when you do that, because it puts an expertise back in their hands. And then the last thing would be if they say something about, let's say, for example, she says, well, I need a kitchen space. What size would be a sufficient kitchen space? Right? So ask them about measurements. Start thinking about size of things. Okay? Any other questions before we have her come in? You guys, by the way, you guys are going to be the ones running this. All right? I'm going to invite her in, and then you guys are going to ask the questions. Okay? Any last questions for me before I bring her in?
What other questions can you ask?
That's up for you guys. That's where you guys are going to have to, right? But last thing, think about it. You might have to ask, we always think about this. We have to start thinking three-dimensionally. So you might actually have to ask them, are there any height requirements? Okay? That's another good question. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay.